Sorry about that one, folks. I actually ran out of space on my computer because videos are huge, who knew? And so I've just cleared up some space. We're going to finish up Lab 4 and then we'll go straight into Lab 5. So kudzu, you've seen it covering trees all over the place in the south. It'll come in these 3-leaf clumps. I think that these leaves look sort of like ghosts, fitting because it's spooky season. Comes in a vine, and it'll just be loping all over everything. No flowers right now, so just know what these leaves look like, and the kudzu vine. All right, poison ivy. So this is a 3-leaved plant. It can grow up in a vine. I'm going to scroll down a bit. Vines can get huge. And so if we do bring in poison ivy, I'm sure not going to touch it, so it might be in a bag, who knows. But even if it's not, know what poison ivy looks like so that you don't touch it during the lab. A good thing that I've always thought to remember poison ivy, and on this plant it's not so evident, because I think that, no, never mind. But on this plant, it is more so. So being from Michigan, we always hold up the glove to show people where we're from in the state. And so the leaves on poison ivy look like glove here, and then if you were to put your hands over each other with the thumbs sticking out, that's what the top leaf is going to look like with double thumbs here. And that's always a good way I've found to remember poison ivy. Alright, so we're just going to hop straight into Lab 5 so we don't have a minute-long video. Alright, so Lab 5, we have the prickly pear. This is the only cactus we talked about. I think it may be the only cactus in Georgia, and I sure am not flying to Arizona tomorrow, so if you see a cactus, it's going to be that prickly pear. I just learned today that it bounces if you ever want to have a good time, and my hands are now full of needles. I've been picking them out for the last 3 hours, so be careful handling this one. Alright, we have Spanish moss. It's an epiphyte. And Spanish moss is very, very distinct, right? I mean, I don't think you could confuse this for anything else. It's also doesn't grow in North Georgia. And so unless Dr. Martin is taking a road trip in the next couple days, I'd be really surprised. Oh, excuse that text. I'd be really surprised to see it. Okay, Arrow arum. So that's the one that we sometimes confuse with our duck potato. And so remember, spiders sit on potatoes, and the veins of this one aren't going to come from the same point, right? We see it coming up all the way up the spine, and also the veins aren't so evident on the arrow arum. It's also, and you can see in this picture especially, it's not as round as the duck potato, right? It's a lot longer, and the angles are a bit sharper, whereas a duck potato will come all the way around, rounded. Alright, blue mist flower. So if I'm not mistaken, this is our only sort of purpley flower. They have these little wispy petals, right? They almost look like a blazing star, and blazing stars aren't on our list, so you can be pretty safe and feel like there's a blue mist flower. This is another one that there's a lot of them down on the Riverwalk if you're still looking for it for your collection. And then pretty triangular leaves all the way up. Camphorweed. Why does every plant have to have yellow flowers? Alright, so camphorweed, let's see. Sort of like tiny sunflowers, the flowers look like, and not all of them have perfect flowers right now. Pretty, I guess, sort of like an arrowhead shaped leaf, right? And the other thing about camphorweed is that it's the one that I think smells good. Some people do not think it smells good. Alright, desmodium, and I'm going to call it desmodium. It's also called beggarweed, but I don't want people to get confused with beggar ticks, which is that Biden's genus, which we're coming to later. So it's one of our legumes. Let's see, it has these big rounded leaves, and like so many of the legumes, they're going to come in threes. And these are often vines that will be creeping along the ground. Yeah, I know we just saw that today, so I won't spend too much time on it. Alright, ground ivy or creeping Charlie. So this is another thing that'll just be creeping along the ground, right? Make sure you know the difference between this and like a geranium leaf. But heart-shaped leaf with little bumps all the way down, it will probably be pretty small, and if you get a lot of them attached together, it'll look like a tiny little vine. Well, creeping Charlie, it'll look like it grew very close to the ground. Alright, heartleaf ginger. So these are named because they have leaves shaped like hearts. So if it looks like it came from a tree, that perfect heart's going to be a red bud. If it looks like it came straight off the ground, most hearts are going to be a heartleaf ginger, and it's going to have a bit of off coloring on it. I think most of the ones I've seen are still green, but it's just going to have a little bit of lighter color than on that leaf. Alright, jewelweed, also called spotted touch-me-not. This is a very succulent plant. It wilts very easily and has beautiful orange flower. Typically will be sort of viney. It grows out in tendrils. Yeah, let's see. I've only seen one all semester and I picked it. So we'll see if we can't find another one. But that is jewelweed. Let's see, so this is where we get to the thing that's called beggar ticks. It's also called Spanish needle and burr marigold, but it's typically safe just to call them by their genus, which is Bidens. There's a lot of different types. They'll have these tiny flowers, very small flowers on most of them. And the important thing to know now, because I think most of them are losing their flowers, is what the sort of bud looks like, right? Called beggar ticks because this bud is really good at getting caught up in clothes, things like that. The ones that I have seen around have been the bipinnata, which have very distinct leaves, and then the frondosa, again having these long, thin leaves with the little spikes. Alright, three-seeded Mercury. So this one, the identification is really in the name, has these tiny, three tiny little guys on the top, and they sit right in there, these three tiny quote-unquote seeds, long, thin leaves, and this pretty ornate looking bud at the top of most of them, where all the leaves start to get really close together. Thin stem, it's going to come up just like that. So we have bamboo. The one that Zach brought into lab when we looked at it was golden bamboo. That's going to be this one. It's a huge grass, long, thin leaves, and the stem will also have more of a golden color, and that's going to be important when we get down into our river cane. There's also another type of bamboo in the south. There's actually some growing right outside of Warnell, and that's it's called, I can't remember the common name. It's Nandina domestica, which is a completely different genus than golden bamboo, and it might be, I don't want to give you the wrong answer, but you could, if you did want to know, you could just search this scientific name. And both of these are invasive, or at least non-native. I'm not sure if this one is invasive. This one is certainly invasive, and it's been taking up the niche of this river cane. River cane is going to be likely smaller than bamboo. Grows up along rivers, and this is a native plant. Also can be found on the Riverwalk, though I'm not sure you necessarily want to go out and pick a bunch of this just because it's sort of rare and because its habitat is more and more being encroached on. And so, bamboo, river cane. Alright, saw palmetto, unless Zach raids the university gardens again. There's no saw palmetto growing this far north, but it is also going to be the only palmetto on our list. Very spiky leaves, pointed, comes out in a fan, and not really any other plants to confuse that one with. Alright, shrubs, our baccharis, or our salt bush. So this one's going to be one of those plants that comes in a big bush. There are several species and they all look slightly different. And so I would look in your book and just look at the pictures there for that salt bush, just because each species looks a little different. I also think, though, that these are very hard to come by in North Georgia, and so not impossible. They are moving north, but I haven't seen any around. Alright, buttonbush. So buttonbushes, leathery leaves, and the thing that's going to tell you off to a buttonbush are these little, why it's named, these little buttons. And they look similar to the little baubles that you see on a, what's the word, sensitive briar. But obviously this is going to be a bush, it's not a legume, and so if you see these baubles, these little buttons on a plant that has leathery leaves, it's going to be your button bush. Alright, multiflora rose. So this is in the rose family. It's going to have rose leaves. They're going to be coming out on either side of each other, two leaves coming from a point ending in a single leaf. I don't know if they have flowers anymore, but they will have little thorns all the way up. So what I would say is just make sure you know the difference between the multiflora rose and a rubus. The leaves do look different and you'll be just fine. Alright, the mimosa. Got a lot of these in my apartment parking lot. It's another one of our legumes. It looks like it has that similar leaf structure as a lot of our legumes. It has its pea pod and just these big fans of compound leaves all over it. And so this is probably going to be, if you see this big clump of this sort of leaf and it's on a woody stem, that's going to be the mimosa tree. Also an invasive, which is unfortunate because it's used as an ornamental and people love it. Alright, sawtooth oak. You can see 3 of these right outside Odom if you go sort of east, I think. And so sawtooth oaks don't have, what's thought of as your traditional oak leaf, right? Because it's just very long and thin with serrated edges, and the acorn has this magnificent cap on it. So it's pretty easy to distinguish it from the other oaks. And people liked to plant these because they grow faster than other oaks, but they don't always mast earlier than other oaks. They can, but that isn't a given. So through Lab 5, those are all the plants that we covered that I had noted down. Some other things that we covered in later labs, though, just to make sure you have a grip on, just in case Dr. Martin brings it in. There's 3 off the top of my head. Look at the butterfly pea, the Florida paspalum, and then low panic grass. Not in my lists, but 3 plants that I would recommend being familiar with. And then really quickly, I just wanted to make an errata and addenda section, because in Lab 3, I think I may have shown you the wrong picture for what. Oh, you know what? I think it's lab 2. So let me get to that. Well, you know what I'll do? I'll just upload a very short separate errata and addenda correcting my mistake. So I will see you later.